Hello and welcome to Scream Scene, the horror movie podcast where we watch every horror movie ever made in chronological order and then we rank them from best to worst. My name's Sarah.
And I'm Ben.
Thank you so much for listening to us today. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing okay.
Hey.
Yeah, it's a challenging world out there, but we're doing our best. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, about the same.
Yeah.
I've been trying out some different medication, and I was joking how the medication I was on was making me have ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So it's given me a lot more empathy for how you live.
Well, that's good to know.
Like I already cared for you and tried to understand the world from your point of view and tried to be accommodating, but man, it fucking sucks, dude. I've since switched medications. Today's my first day on the new medication.
The new medication.
New medication. So we'll see. I don't know. It apparently takes a bit to take effect. But that's how I am.
All right. Well, I mean, yeah, we're having our own mental health journeys. You know, I've got a new therapist I've had for like a month and a half now, and she's really great. And you know, we're just trying to hold back the darkness.
Absolutely. I saw someone saying on Blue Sky the other day how the way we survive the macro horrors is through micro joys.
Yeah, that seems about right. That's sort of how I've been doing things.
Yeah. So hold on to those glimmers, my friends. And thank you for tuning in to our show as part of that.
Yeah. Now, this discussion of mental health is on topic.
Yeah.
Because today we are talking about a movie that is all about psychology and mental health. Today we are watching The Cabinet of Caligari from 1962, a remake of the classic, well-known German expressionist horror film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from 1919. Somewhere along the 1920. Somewhere along the way, Caligari seems to have lost his license.
His doctorate.
Yeah, he's no longer licensed to practice whatever he was practicing in the original movie. It's been a really long time. It's been like 40 years. And I don't know, 350 episodes? I have no idea. What episode was that?
Episode 5.
Wow.
And it's currently ranked number 50.
That's still pretty good.
That's really good considering we have nearly 320 movies on the list. That's wild.
The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is like a classic horror movie that influenced, you know, not only all horror movies, but like expressionism and film noir and huge swaths of cinema history, including the entire filmography of Tim Burton. Hugely iconic movie, but has been a while. So for those of our listeners who weren't there back at episode 5, or it's maybe been a while since they've listened to episode 5, why don't you remind us a little bit about what that movie's deal was?
Sure. If someone does go back and listen to episode 5, please tell me what you think of like audio quality and if you feel like we've improved. I think we've improved. Our setup has certainly improved. But has your experience improved? Write in and tell us.
Please tell us we're doing better than we were doing 340 episodes ago.
So, as Ben said, German Expressionism is deeply tied to the 1920 Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And in that episode, I talk about how it's a theater movement, and then it comes to the screen almost fully formed. So it's just beautifully on display. And that discussion at the top of the show around psychology is also deeply tied to expressionism. It's about taking the inner experience of the characters and portraying it through set design. I don't know how much of that continues into this movie, but as you may have heard as we've gone through the decades, German Expressionism comes to America largely through Karl Freund, and you see it kind of first with The Cat and the Canary. It's dark, it's spooky, it's very, very visual, and then it almost diverges into a form known as film noir, with the shadows from blinds taking the place of the slanted hallways of someone's mind. So it's gone through many iterations, and even in the 60s, I wouldn't describe it as a whole genre. It's kind of dispersed and been absorbed into so many different things that it's really just, that's a sign of a good set design. Right. You know, like if you're doing something stylistic, you're often taking some cues from the tree that at its seed was German Expressionism. Mm-hmm. As far as the 1920 movie goes, you know, I highly recommend you check it out because it's, I believe, the first time that we see Conrad Veidt for the podcast, though he is in a movie we watch later for horror adjacent called Eerie Tales or something like that.
Yes.
But I forget if we watched that for the show before or after this because it's a horror adjacent. But in any case, Conrad Veidt wows the screen as Cesare the sleepwalker, because I cannot say somnambulist.
You got close.
Yeah.
Somnambulist.
Somnambulist. Listen, one of the side effects of that first medication is that my nose is congested 24/7, and you probably heard it in the last episode.
You mean like how mine is?
But yeah, I guess so. I don't know. But it's meaning that some words are really, really hard to say, and I already have a speech impediment.
Sure.
Other notable folks in the cast, Werner Krauss as Dr. Caligari. Now, I'm not going to rehash their careers and everything because that's not really why we're here today. We're here to talk about the original film and to see how it gets adapted into the 60s version. So to recap the original plot, it opens with us seeing a gentleman. We learn his name is Francis. He's sitting on a bench with an older man and he's complaining how he's being haunted. It's driven from his family. He feels all alone. He sees this dazed woman who is kind of a space case walk by, and he explains to the old man that, yeah, that used to be my fiancée Jane, but the ghosts have driven her insane as well. And then he goes on to tell his story. Francis and his friend Alan have kind of a love triangle situation with Jane. She kind of needs to choose between the two of them. And one day they decide to go on like a threesome date because Francis and Alan are best buds. Meanwhile, we see that a mysterious man whose name is Dr. Caligari has applied to join the town fair to show off his exhibit of a sleepwalker. Now, the person who's supposed to give him the permit gives him a really hard time, and then that night, we see that poor town bureaucrat gets murdered in his sleep by some mysterious figure. Caligari opens up his spot at the town fair, and his whole thing is having Cesare, the sleepwalker, rise from his coffin in almost like a trance and say, you know, what someone's future is going to be. And each day it's like, oh yes, you, old lady, you're going to die. You, man, you're going to die. And in fact, when our threesome couple arrive, Alan is told he's going to die. And then that night, we see that same mysterious figure who murdered the bureaucrat comes and murders Alan. So Francis and Jane are both very upset about the death of their friend, and Francis begins to try to investigate a bit. We do have a bit of a red herring going on of someone trying to kill an old woman for her inheritance and trying to pin it on this mysterious figure, but it's not actually which I bring up only because it might be in the 60s version. And ultimately, Alan sees this mysterious figure finally, and it seems to be Cesare. He rises from his coffin, goes through the town, and at this point, he's actually heading to Jane to stab her. And instead, he is overtaken by her beauty and decides to kidnap her instead. Now, the movie makes it clear that Caligari is pulling the strings of Cesare, and Cesare, he kidnaps Jane as a means of his own will, rather than following through with killing her. They do some further investigation, and Francis realizes that Caligari is actually the nearby asylum's director, who has been using Cesare, who's a patient there, to reenact the story from centuries earlier of this town where a doctor, brought a sleepwalker and committed murders using this sleepwalker. So in his mind, he's like, I will get to the bottom of Cesare's sleepwalkingness, somnambulism, by reenacting this and actually killing people. Makes sense, right? It doesn't really make sense because Caligari himself is going insane. And we get this amazing sequence where he's running back to the asylum, and the words in this really beautiful script comes up of him saying, like, I must become Caligari. No, I am Caligari. Ultimately, in this climax, Caligari becomes one of the patients in his own asylum. And then we flash back to the present, because that was all a flashback. And Francis concludes his story, and then it turns out Francis himself is a patient at the asylum, as is Jane, and Cesare, though he's awake and seeming relatively chill, and the man that Francis describes as Dr. Caligari is the asylum director. Francis goes to attack the director, but he's restrained because he's like, oh, Caligari, you've ruined my life. But ultimately, after listening to his story, Caligari has now realized how he can cure Francis. And that's how the movie ends.
So the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, for being such a weird movie, both in like plot and visuals, having all this like upsetting, morbid, macabre stuff in it, it was like a huge hit. It was like a cultural milestone. It had all this influence afterwards. It got brought to the US, where it was also like a big hit. And so after its release, the director and the cast, they all went on to do a lot of other really cool stuff, which we covered in many of our early episodes.
The director was Robert Vina.
Several unsuccessful attempts to produce sequels and remakes of Caligari followed the original film's success. Director Robert Vina bought the film rights from Studio Universum Film AG in 1934 with the intention of making a sound remake in the French surrealist style.
Oh, sure. That makes sense.
But Vina's death in 1938 nixed that plan. The producer of the original film, Eric Palmer, and the writer of the original film, Hans Janowitz, both attempted to affirm competing claims to the remake rights in 1944. Janowitz sort of going from the, hey, I wrote the story, so it's my story to retell position. Palmer coming from the like, well, the thing that made Caligari so unique was the film's production, so I should own the rights. They both kind of tried to get access to the remake rights in 1944. Both of them were hoping to produce a Hollywood remake of the movie. I think both men by that point had fled to Hollywood. Unfortunately, both attempts failed because any argument that they were making to why they should have the rights would depend on German copyright laws. And in 1944, the US did not recognize like Nazi laws in any way, shape, or form. Like you couldn't make an argument based on that in a US court. So neither Palmer or Janowitz could assert rights to the property. The rights to the property in the US were held by its American distributor, which was in 1921 Samuel Goldwyn. In 1947, work began on a Caligari sequel in Hollywood, creatively titled The Return of Caligari, to be produced by Paul Kohner and directed by Ernst Maitre. And in this sequel concept, Caligari is revealed to have become a Nazi officer and war criminal, and he's now like on the run. This sequel idea was never actually produced. Obviously.
Yeah, it's I mean, I see where they're coming from, but it feels like a real hard right into like the real world where the original felt so detached.
It's also, I think, something that starts to get really difficult the longer time passes, because even if it's the late 40s and you are a German expat filmmaker like Fritz Lang, who was in Hollywood at the time, and you remember what a big deal this movie was 20 years ago, you're now talking about like making a English language Hollywood sequel to an originally German silent film that got brought over 20 years ago.
Yeah, hard sell for an audience.
Yeah, especially by the early 50s when a lot of the big Hollywood studios were burning their collections of silent films for the silver nitrate because they were convinced that like no one would ever want to see them again. There was no money in re-releasing them. There was no money in putting them on TV, etc. I don't have confirmation of this, but my theory as to why we're finally seeing a Caligari remake now in 1962 is sort of related to why in the early 60s we also started to see sequels to the Dr. Mabuse films by Fritz Lang from the 20s being produced in like Germany. And that's because by the early 60s, we have seen now the rise of film schools.
Oh.
And
they probably would have had access to prints. And so these are the fanboys wanting to bring it back into the public consciousness.
Yeah, you're starting to see filmmakers who are inspired by these films in a kind of second generation way, where they weren't around when the movies first came out, but they are seeing them in film school classes. You know, these 16 millimeter prints of Caligari or Nosferatu are starting to become these cult things. And by the, early to mid 60s, silent film has kind of like a resurgence on like the art house circuit and becomes this thing where we see like the re-release of Hexen that got narrated and with like the psychedelic music put to it or whatever, and these different kinds of re-releases.
That's fair. We are seeing the rise of the original hipster.
Yeah. So I can't confirm, but I think that is my suspicion as to why like someone would try to make Caligari now, like 40 years after the original hit, because it's like, oh, it's coming back into the public conversation.
Yeah.
So in 1960, producer Robert Lippert acquired the rights to Caligari from Samuel Goldwyn and Universum for $50,000 to be produced as a remake for his like B-movie production company that made second features for 20th Century Fox. Now, normally, Lippert's B pictures for Fox at this time cost about $500,000. That was the typical budget. But Lippert strongly believed in the potential of a Caligari remake at this time, and so it was given a budget of $1 million.
Double.
And shot in CinemaScope.
Whoa.
To direct, Lippert brought in Roger Kay, a 40-year-old French director of Grand Guignol Theatre back in Paris. who also happened to have a degree in psychology.
Yeah, I can see this making sense.
Born as Roger Kramer in Cairo in 1921, Kay had directed television through the 1950s, but the Caligari remake would be his first feature film.
A first-time director on a movie that has $1 million budget is risky.
Yeah, Lippert thought that Kay was like the perfect man for the job with his Grand Guignol and psychology backgrounds. Kay definitely impressed Lippert. The producer thought that Kay was going to be the next big thing. Like he had discovered this young kid, young at 40, who was going to become like the next big major director because of this movie. Meanwhile, people like Henry Spalding and Maury Dexter and others who worked for Lippert's production company felt that remaking Caligari was a bad idea.
Oh.
But Lippert believed in Kay and instructed his people to give Kay a wide berth. Like, just give this guy what he wants. He knows what he's doing.
No, he doesn't. This is his first movie.
Kay wanted to create a completely modern reinterpretation of Caligari, homaging the name and the story, but ultimately creating a realistic, believable take that therefore wouldn't signal the twist ahead of time to the audience with unusual sets or production designs. One of the sort of things about Expressionism is, as Sarah mentioned, the sets and appearance of the movie are meant to be like a reflection of the character's inner turmoil. And so you could make the argument that the twist that Francis was crazy all along is kind of
foreshadowed.
Yeah, by the fact that everything looks so wild and zany, right? Kay didn't want to follow the plot of the original movie beat for beat. He didn't want to have that melodrama. He wanted a modern psychological thriller that had similar themes and had a similar twist. And was just enough like the old movie that people would see the connections, but different enough that it's this is a new take for 1962.
Okay. I don't know if I agree, but I do respect the reasonings.
So Kay hired Robert Bloch, the writer of the Psycho novel, to pen the screenplay. And so this is the third time we've seen Bloch, the second screenplay we've seen from him now. And Bloch ultimately found the Cabinet of Caligari to be his most frustrating working experience in Hollywood.
Oh, okay.
Bloch and Kay had a falling out during the development of the film, which led to Kay heavily rewriting Bloch's script to such an extent that Kay attempted to get Bloch's credit taken off the film.
Whoa.
Bloch kind of was ready to wash his hands of it. He'd had such a bad experience with Kay that he was okay, fine. But Samuel Goldwyn Jr. went to Bloch and said, no, you should fight this. And so Bloch ended up going to the Writers Guild for arbitration, and the guild awarded him sole credit. So only Robert Bloch is credited with writing this movie.
Okay.
Which ultimately was probably better for the film's marketing anyway, because it's written and directed by some guy you've never heard of versus written by the author of Psycho.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kay wanted the film to have a theme of questioning reality. He wanted to get the audience to fear that nothing is what it appears to be, to kind of doubt everything. That was the idea.
Love that.
When Maury Dexter, who was the production manager for Lippert, read Kay's script and saw how different it was from the original movie, he advised Lippert to fire Kay. But Lippert continued to back his find.
Oh, no.
The character of Francis does not exist in this version. Instead, our lead character is Jane.
Oh, that makes sense.
Who also kind of has the Francis role. That's just the main character now. She is played in this film by actress Glynis Johns. Are you familiar with Glynis Johns?
No.
All right, so Johns was born in 1923 in South Africa. Her mother was an Australian concert pianist, and her father was a Welsh actor, Mervyn Johns. Glynis was raised in England, and she was a dancing prodigy. She joined the London Ballet School at age 5 and earned a degree to teach dance at age 11.
Whoa.
She began performing on stage at age 8, and she made her screen debut in 1938 at age 14. She had wanted to study to become a scientist and get a university degree, but her parents saw her meteoric rise as a performer and pushed her to continue acting. Basically being like, well, we can send you to school or you can be in a movie with Laurence Olivier. We're choosing the second one.
Yeah.
By the 1940s, she was an acclaimed female lead in British film, known for her striking beauty and husky, sexy voice. In 1948, she played the mermaid Miranda in the romantic fantasy comedy of the same name, which she reprised in a sequel in 1954.
Miranda 2, Return to the Ocean.
No. In the 1950s, she appeared in a large number of noirs and thrillers, and she also began appearing in Hollywood-backed pictures, such as The Sword and the Rose and Rob Roy, both for Disney. In 1956, she came to the United States to pursue a Broadway career and began appearing in more American films. Johns did not enjoy working on Caligari because Kay would yell at her on set. There was one incident where Maury Dexter showed up to check on the production and found everybody just standing around waiting and Kay like sitting in his director's chair smoking a cigar, and John's nowhere to be found. And Dexter had to be like, hey, what's going on here? And they were like, well, Kay yelled at John, so she ran off set. She's in her trailer. She won't come out until Kay apologizes. And Dexter goes to talk to Kay, and Kay's like, well, I'm the director. Like, people have to do what I say on this set. So she's in the wrong for like arguing with me. So Dexter calls Lippert and is like, hey, your boy wonder here
is fucking up.
Like nothing's happening on set because he's pissed off Glynis Johns. And Lippert on the phone says, well, you need to go over to Kay and tell him that he needs to apologize to Glynis Johns or he's fired. Because at this point, Glynis Johns is the bigger deal.
And also, anytime that you have downtime on set, it's like
wasting money.
So you're just burning money.
Dexter on the phone says to Lippert, no, you hired Kay. You told me to give him a wide berth. I'm not going to go over there and tell him that he has to do this or he's fired. You have to come down here and tell him that he has to do this or he's fired.
Good.
So Lippert comes all the way down to set smoking a bigger cigar than Kay's and sets the kids straight, basically. And he said, you have to go over there and apologize to Glynis Johns or whatever you need to do to get the movie made, or I will send you back to wherever it was I found you.
I feel like there's a long list of like directors who fuck up because they think they're too much of a big deal. You know, like I'm thinking of that Fantastic Four movie that bombed.
Josh Trank, yeah.
Yeah, and just like, yeah, anyways.
I think it's what happens when you pull a director, whether they're talented or not, kind of out of obscurity and give them a project that is way bigger than anything they've ever done before, because it's really hard, even though like this guy's 40, right? Like Josh Trank was a kid, basically. But still, it's hard to then avoid the feeling of like, oh, like I'm a genius.
Yeah.
Right. Anyways, Kay had to go apologize. Glynis Johns came back and finished the film. If you are someone listening to the show who's not like a big fan of like Broadway theater or old British movies, the thing you probably know Glynis Johns from came after this in 1964 when she played Winifred Banks, the mother in Walt Disney's Mary Poppins.
Oh, the suffragette.
Yes.
Oh, she's great.
Her career remained strong for the next 3 decades. She mainly concentrated on her stage work, such as appearing in the Stephen Sondheim musical A Little Night Music, for which the song Send in the Clowns was written for her.
That sounds so ominous. I'm not familiar with the song.
You don't know Send in the Clowns?
No, it sounds really intense.
It's like very like melancholy. It's like send in the clowns, you know? You'd know it if you heard it.
Okay.
Anyways, Glynis Johns passed away in 2024 at the age of 100.
Wow. Go her.
Yeah. The role of Caligari in this film, meanwhile, is played by Dan O'Hurley. Born in 1919 in Ireland, he graduated in 1944 with a degree in architecture. He had developed an interest in acting while at university, however, and decided after graduation to pursue it full-time. He appeared in his first film in 1947 in Carol Reed's Odd Man Out, and in 1948 he played Macduff in Orson Welles' version of Macbeth.
Okay, so we've seen him before. Not for the show, but...
So it was this role that later led Louis Buñuel to cast O'Hurley in the title role of his 1954 adaptation of Robinson Crusoe, a role which would earn O'Hurley an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. More Hollywood roles followed, such as appearing in Douglas Sirk's 1959 remake of Imitation of Life. After Caligari, O'Hurley played General Black in the 1964 Cold War classic Failsafe, and later in life he was known for his roles as the CEO of OCP in RoboCop 1 and 2.
Oh, yeah.
And as Andrew Packard in the original run of Twin Peaks. He passed away in 2005 at the age of 85.
Okay.
So an actor I mostly know for when he's a lot older, actually.
But he's been a big deal this whole time.
Mm-hmm. So Kay created a color-coded matrix of which emotions he hoped the film to evoke in the audience during each moment of the runtime. This has nothing to do with the production design. The movie's in black and white. It was just a big like mood board that he had basically where he was like, yeah, you know, filmmakers in the past just had to go off like instinct and gut to like guess as to like what emotion like different things would evoke in the audience. But I believe there's like a scientific method we can use here. And I've developed this color code where each color is a different emotion. And I've blocked out the film and planned all this stuff. The feeling on set from the crew was that Kay was a pseudo-intellectual with a self-inflated ego.
I know a few of those.
So Lippert thought that this movie was going to be great, and he wanted to use Johns and O'Hurley again after it for a new adaptation of Trilby. But this was not to be. Released on May 25th, 1962 by 20th Century Fox, The Cabinet of Caligari was a critical and commercial failure.
Yeah. I had a feeling because I had not heard of it at all.
In 1963, Kay would disown the film in an interview, claiming that Fox had considerably altered the movie from his original vision, changing it into a lurid, sex-charged picture, and that his original cut was being held by the Museum of Modern Art. I cannot find any confirmation of this, but what I do know is that Kay would not direct another theatrical feature film until the 1981 French film La Poussée et le Privé, which would then...
Cat in the Private?
Yes.
Okay.
Which would then be his last feature film before his death at age 80 in 2001.
Okay.
As for this movie, The Cabinet of Caligari received a home video release in 2005 on DVD from Fox Home Video with no special features other than the theatrical trailer being included.
You know, in these days, that's something.
In 2005, it was nothing.
It's nothing.
No commentary, no alternate hidden Museum of Modern Art director's cut.
No, because that doesn't exist.
So yeah, that's it. No re-release since 2005. It's not on any streaming services to the best of my knowledge.
Okay. So the reason why that Trilby adaptation didn't happen is because this movie bombed?
Yes.
And not because those two actors were like, fuck this studio, we're never working with you again.
Well, probably just fuck this director. We're
Yeah.
never working with this guy again. But yes.
Wow. Okay, well, I'm really excited to see this movie now. I mean, I was excited before, but I'm like, what the heck is going to be on the screen?
Yeah.
Hopefully you can find a copy to watch along. And in the meantime, you're going to hear a brief musical interlude. And when we come back, we will discuss The Cabinet of Caligari from 1962, directed by Roger Kay.
See you on the other side, everybody. Welcome back to Scream Scene, everybody. We just finished watching The Cabinet of Caligari.
Caligari.
I heard Caligari.
They were saying Gary.
All right. From 1962, directed by Roger Kay. So we had, I think, low expectations going into this. Sarah, what did you think?
So I don't think the low expectations are deserved for this movie. I think the direction and everything is like mid, but they're doing some cool stuff by the climax. I think the writing is interesting from Robert Bloch. I think the acting is also interesting, particularly with our lead actress. And yeah, the movie was fine. I don't know. It's kind of, you were saying how this movie's kind of in a trend of some like psychological movies. And yeah, what did you think?
So I actually did like this.
Yeah.
I'm kind of in agreement there. I think this was much better than what I was expecting based on the research that we did. I do think that it needs to be judged on two levels, but that ultimately those two levels are like kind of inextricably intertwined and influence each other, which is that like the fairest thing to do is to look at it entirely as its own thing. But I think it's impossible to not also look at it as like a remake of Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and how it does that and approaches that and how effective it is in that regard.
Sure.
And comparing it, you know, it's almost like it's not really fair to compare it to the older movie because it's doing its own thing. And yet it's also impossible to not compare it to the old movie.
Yeah. Well, why don't I tell the folks at home what the movie's about?
Mm-hmm.
So when we open, we see this middle-aged woman. Her name's Jane. She's driving on a bit of a road trip, and the music is indicating that this is like a fun time. She gets a flat, and so she starts walking down the road to try to find some tools or a phone at a house so she can call for help. She ends up basically wandering into almost like a horror movie set because it's like daytime and fine where she is, and then cut to going through some bushes and it's nighttime, and it's like going onto the set of like Clue or something, except the house itself is modern. They still managed to have that spooky house vibe even inside, but it's all modern. When she approaches this modern horror haunted house, she is greeted by a man with a goatee and dark hair, and we learn that this is Caligari. We also meet a woman named Christine or Chris, and she's told by Caligari to go get Jane's car and see if it can be fixed. Jane is invited to stay the night because it ends up the car isn't fixable in a night. And, you know, she finds Caligari attractive, but that kind of fades when he starts asking very probing questions, very inappropriate questions, and shows her some cards that we don't get to see that she kind of freaks out at and runs away from. As the movie continues, we see that she's ultimately not allowed to leave. We meet some other guests in this house. Paul, who is this elderly professor type. He has, white hair. I think he might have a white goatee, but it's white so it's hard to tell if he has facial hair.
I think he's clean shaven.
Okay. We also meet Ruth, Martin, and an attendant named David. As things are going on, Caligari continues to kind of like put Jane ill at ease. She goes to have a bath because Robert Bloch needs to have something in a bathroom, I guess. And Caligari is like peeping through this like glass window on the ceiling. Through this, we also meet someone named Mark, who isn't a guest. He only appears here after, I think, 7 p.m. So he's kind of a mystery. He's a younger man. And he clearly wants to try to help Jane. He seems to know a lot about her inexplicably. So Ruth, the other guest, she offers to try to help Jane get out. But we learn later that she is punished by basically getting beaten by David, overseen by Caligari, and Jane believes she's murdered. This is when she goes to Paul and basically asks for some advice. Now, I'm skipping over quite a bit because this movie, I would say it's paced and has story beats akin to a drama. And because we're all in the same place, some order of events might be a little out of whack here. But ultimately, I think all of that kind of serves for like some mood setting. I think I've hit some of the major points. And we get to a point where Jane reveals some like theories that she has about Caligari and who he is to Paul.
Yeah, there's a lot of sequences and bits in this movie where, not in terms of tone, but in terms of structure, it's a little bit like a Looney Tunes, Wile E. Coyote kind of thing. And what I mean by that is it's hard to discern like a 3-act structure here. It's mostly like Jane continually having ideas or plans on how to escape or how to beat Caligari or how to get out of this situation. And then those plans failing in some scary or upsetting way. And this happens over and over again in a repetitive fashion, such that like there was a bunch of times where I thought we were at the climax of the movie and then it wasn't.
Yeah.
Which makes it like a little difficult to ascertain like how much more there is to go or how much more in the story there is. Like Jane attempts to end it all through overdosing on sleeping pills at one point, but then it turns out that the pills were fake, so she's fine the next day. Or she tries to escape through like the hedge maze at the edge of the property and gets lost and has to go back. Things like this that sort of occur over and over until she finally comes to Paul.
And she explains that through her theories, Pepe Sylvia never actually existed. Sorry. She comes to Paul and says, I believe Caligari is a madman, and yet he seems to have pretty much everyone under his control. Like they have to listen to him, except for you, Paul. You seem to be on almost an even keel with him. And I could tell that you were kind of like a professor medical type. So I believe that Caligari is your patient. You're a psychiatrist or psychologist, and so you must know him better than anyone. And Paul neither confirms nor denies. They do a good job of showing therapists in this movie doing that frustrating thing of neither confirming nor denying, but merely letting you continue talking. And she's like, I believe, yes, Caligari is a madman, but I believe that he's also impotent. He literally cannot act on his impulses towards me, and that's why he's torturing me in this way.
Yeah, because all of his like probing inappropriate questions towards her have been generally sexual in theme.
So she's like, I'm going to push him on this, and it will either lead to him letting me go or him killing me. which do you think will happen since you know him best? And Paul's like, well, he would never hurt you. I know him pretty well. So Jane goes to confront Caligari. She tries to seduce him. Ultimately, he doesn't succumb, I guess. So she fails. But Paul comes to her and says, I think you were getting him where you needed him, so he would let you go. So go see him again. When confronted again, Caligari reveals to Jane that he and Paul are the same person. And this sparks a mental break in Jane, in such that we get expressionist hallways as she's running down away from the office, doorways to nowhere, mazes, and some superimposed revolving doors. So that's her breakdown. When Jane comes out of it, we are in kind of a point of view shot with her voiceover saying like, oh, but Paul, you're here. And oh, there's no strange revolving door at the start of this office. And it's kind of like her coming to reality and realizing that she was not necessarily imagining, but she was having visions of what she thought was happening.
She was delusional.
Yeah, delusional. What she thought was a torture chamber where Ruth was murdered was actually electroshock therapy. What she thought were decapitated heads were actually people sitting in one of those like seated sauna things.
Yeah.
And those cards that kind of prompted her to freak out about Caligari in the beginning were Rorschach blot cards. And Paul explains how he was doing some boundary pushing methods of poking and prodding. That's the therapist's job, to poke and prod and really push the patient into having, in the case of Jane, into having a second mental break that would allow her to be cured. Through the movie, we saw that there was tension between David and Caligari, and David almost like offering to help Jane escape because he wasn't agreeing with Caligari's methods. And he comes in and he explains like, oh, good, I'm glad to see you're doing okay, Jane. Yeah, I didn't agree with these methods. I'm kind of a more traditional minded person, so your healing would have taken years instead of like 2 days.
Yeah, her car didn't break down, her mind broke down, and so she was brought to this mental hospital and became delusional, and then Paul shocked her out of her delusions.
Yeah. When someone's like hyperventilating and freaking out and having a breakdown and you slap them and they're out of it, kind of like a more extreme version of that.
Sure.
So she can leave. As she's gathering her things, we exit that point of view shot and we see in a mirror that she is older. She's actually an older woman than what we originally thought she was. And Mark, who was kind of positioned as maybe a potential love interest earlier, turns out to be her son. And he comes and picks her up to go home. And that's the end.
Yeah.
The beginning, I have to say, I kept thinking about Rocky Horror.
Yes.
Oh, you got caught with a flat. How about that? And like coming to this strange, creepy castle.
Yeah.
And when she enters, like Caligari and Christine are both so weird and off-putting. It's very like riffraff, and I want to say her name is Magdalene.
Oh, Riffraff's sister.
Yeah, big hair lady.
Yeah. That's Magenta.
So I was kind of close with Magdalena. Yeah, so it does have those vibes, but that's not the tone the movie's going for. So just to get it out there right now, like just let the movie continue and don't try to riff on it or anything. This isn't a riffing movie. It's kind of serious.
Mm-hmm. I think that overall, you said this already, but I'm in agreement that the script is well written. Mm-hmm. I do think it has some lapses, especially towards the end. But the overall conceit reminds me a lot of these other films of this period that were playing with ideas of paranoia and madness, I think about Mirage with Gregory Peck, and I think about The Trial with Anthony Perkins, both of which came out around this time. And it also has me thinking a bit about later shows and movies that depicted this period, like Mad Men, and kind of these ideas around the early 60s as being this period where people in America both kind of had an idyllic life of like ease and plenty and every material comfort you could want. But at the same time, everyone was like very repressed and unhappy. And you have this feeling of like all these things beneath the surface that are about to explode out in the various social conflicts of the 60s to come. And these ideas of paranoia and this feeling of being watched and this feeling of like your memories and perception of reality aren't quite what they seem. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like this was something in the atmosphere around this time in pop culture.
Yeah, I mean, LSD use is being used in like a therapy setting because of the idea of like moving past what your conscious reality is. Like Paul Caligari has some line about even reality is like a personal construction,
a relative term.
Yeah. And so I think, I'm not saying this movie is related to drug culture, but I think that those ideas, as you said, are floating around and are related.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's, 1962 with Paul Caligari, and, come, I think 1963, we're going to get the story of Paul Atreides in the novel Dune. So yeah, like these ideas about like expanded consciousness and what is reality and all of this is starting to become, I think, a little more mainstream in American pop culture.
Mm-hmm. One thing that we kind of spoke to the script. One thing that like I struggled with this movie, and I don't know if it's because of its vintage, but I just kind of want some people to talk about things directly. I get that, we're going to talk a little bit around some like potential sexual assault or rape in her past, but like she believes that she saw Ruth murdered, and she talks around it so many ways with Christine until she says, I saw that Ruth was murdered, so now I'm in danger. And there are other times where it's like, can you just say that like he will not let you leave? Like instead of just being like, oh, I need to get out. Like, I don't know, just like be specific, be direct, so we all know what people are talking about. Listen, I know what you're going to say, that it's the tism, but I don't know. I just think like, especially in a movie where you're kind of like, what is the truth? What is reality? I kind of just want some people to say like, this is what I'm experiencing. What are you specifically experiencing?
Let's compare notes. What is reality? I think I understand where your frustration is coming from, but so I'm of two minds on this.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, I think how was it phrased? I read this thing online recently, trying to order a hamburger at Home Depot.
Sure.
There was this post online about like criticizing movies, like you're watching a horror movie and you're like, why did they go into the basement? What idiots? Or like you're watching a tragedy and you're like, if they had just called each other, no one would have died. And it's like, well, like this is the genre, right? And at a certain stage, you have to ask like, is it a bad movie or are you trying to order a hamburger at Home Depot? And so on the one hand, I gotta say like this obtuseness that you're noticing is like the point, right? Like
I know.
Stylistically, it's this conceit that the movie has of indicating what is going on in the characters' heads through obtuse symbolic dialogue, which is justified due to the twist that this is all taking place in the subjective perspective of a mental patient, right? And I'm pretty familiar with this kind of stuff because it has a very modern theater kind of vibe, and even the like confined setting of the mental hospital makes it kind of perfect for this to be a play.
Yeah.
Rather than a movie in some ways.
Yeah, so Kay's experience in theater makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah. Also, when I was younger and I was involved in theater and, you know, in the early days of me being involved in film and when I wrote scripts a lot, I definitely wrote my fair share of like one scene scripts or monologues or fragments with this kind of style or premise. It's this kind of thing where in 1962 for a movie, this is a little bit cutting edge, which means that by the time I was 14, it was really stereotypical and like baby's first thought kind of thing. But I wrote a lot of stuff that was kind of this like, you know, frame of mind, am I crazy? Or maybe it's you who are the crazy ones kind of stuff, right? And it's this way for a writer to like talk about what's going on with a character in a way that I think feels
more engaging,
but also like vague enough that it can mean a lot of different things. But I do agree with you that in some ways the vagueness becomes a weakness in the script. And where I think it becomes a weakness is specifically at the ending when we get our reveal of like what everything really was, right? Mark's really her son and Ruth was really just doing ECT and like blah, blah, blah.
You want to say what ECT is?
Electroconvulsion therapy.
Okay, cool.
I think the weakness here is that the script provides us with all of these clues around the nature of like, what is Jane's problem? You alluded to like sexual assault or rape. The movie never comes out and says that. I'm not even sure that I agree with you that that's what the movie was implying, but I think it speaks to the point we're making here that like we're having to draw our own conclusions. But we definitely see a ton of clues. We have clues that there were issues in Jane's childhood, that she was unhappy as a child, that maybe she was confined in some way or rejected in some way, or she had issues around her appearance in some way. We see that she has issues around her age. Glynis Johns is like 40 when she makes this movie. She looks gorgeous, by the way. But when she's talking to Mark in the scenes where we think Mark might be like a hot young potential love interest who mysteriously only shows up at like 7 p.m. each night, she claims that she's 27. And then the movie makes this point of having it be a big reveal at the end that she's much older than Glynis Johns appears to be. So she's like maybe 60 or something, and Mark's her young son. And so it's like clearly Jane has some sort of issue around her age. She has issues around wanting to escape, whether that's escaping the facility or the fact that her early joyriding in the sports car is positioned early on in the movie as her explaining it to Caligari is like, oh, I just wanted to get away from everything and have an adventure. Freedom. Yeah. She clearly has issues around sex and her relationships with men, given that like all of the probing questions that Caligari is asking her is like, when was the first time you had sex with a man? How did it feel? What did you say to him? Who was he like? And she later like hints to Mark, or maybe it's Paul or someone, that like she's only had maybe one relationship before and it wasn't real and she wasn't really happy with it or something. And she has clearly like a lot of issues around whether or not she's sexually desirable to men, given that part of the arc of the story is she attracted to Caligari or not? Is Caligari attracted to her? You know, her trying to go and seduce him, where she wears a very sexy little dress and then like strips it off in front of him. So we have all of these hints and clues around like what is Jane's issue. And then ultimately we are actually given no actual answers as to what Jane's problem was, what caused it. We get no real insights into how it was solved even. And I think that's where my frustration with the ambiguity comes into play. I don't mind it during the majority of the movie when we're in like delusional as she puts it in the movie, Alice in Nightmare Land.
Yeah.
Like, then people talking in like vague riddles and stuff is just kind of par for the course of this kind of story. But once we're in the real world, all we learn about her really is that she's older than we thought. She had some kind of nervous breakdown. Her son probably took her here and has been visiting her and is now going to take her home. And that Paul Caligari had this theory that in order to deliver her out of her delusional state, she needed a traumatic shock to break her out of it, which is a very that feels to me like a very common movie psychology idea that I don't know if that actually holds up in real world psychology at all. It feels very counterintuitive to our modern understanding of how to best treat someone. But then that becomes really frustrating to me too, because it's a little unclear, what exactly was it that Paul did that shook her out of it? Because that should be a key insight into her and her problem, the key breakthrough. But it's kind of implied that the shock he delivered that broke her out of it was revealing that he and Caligari were the same person in that final interview where he takes off the fake goatee and stuff. But it's also implied that Jane's mind created Caligari, and that was just her interpretation of her meetings with Paul. So,
yeah,
what did Paul actually do that was so
truth?
That was so, yeah. And even if he has succeeded in breaking her out of her delusional state with some psychological shock, that doesn't seem to address or resolve any of Jane's actual issues that led to the initial breakdown.
Yeah, the why now?
Right. And I think, you talked about everyone talking around everything. And where I was kind of left with was the impression that the subject of Jane's issues around being a woman and aging and perception of self and beauty and attraction and sex and all of these things feels very boundary pushing for 1962 to be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Almost as if we're advanced enough in 1962 in terms of what we can talk about in movies that we can raise these questions,
but we don't know what to do with them.
And we don't quite have the freedom to be explicit.
Yeah. Right.
It's almost as if addressing what's going on with her beyond symbolism and hints is still a bit beyond the pale for a 1962 studio movie. We can suggest these things, but we can't really talk about them.
I think it's also a limit of the genre as well, because this movie is positioning itself as a horror movie, and a movie that was maybe positioned as Oscar bait drama would maybe have more space to
like Shutter Island.
I think people would argue that Shutter Island is a horror movie. No, I'm thinking like Zone of Interest. That movie, subject matter and everything is not the same, but it's positioned as this is a dramatic movie. We're dealing with heavy things. Revolutionary Road. How about that?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think maybe it would have had a bit more space. So let me tell you what I think went down.
Sure. I will just say that, if we're talking about this kind of idea, Psycho, which it's impossible not to compare this to, gives us a revelation around Norman that while it's very long-winded and kind of contrived, at least fits and makes sense and makes all of the clues click into place at the end in a way that this movie I think kind of fails to do.
Yeah. So my theory, we learn about her neglect as a child. When we open on the movie, she is having a fun time. Her car breaks down. And later we are told literally they say, oh, it wasn't my car that broke down. It was I who broke down. So that's symbol. And she's seen as her 40-something, 30-something self. She goes wandering off from the car. Girl, you don't do that. That's dangerous. Next we see it's nighttime. A significant amount of time has passed. And I'm like, okay, so if the mental break happened at a point where she was like in her 30s or 40s, that's why she's appearing in her mind in this more recent mental break at that age. You know, it's kind of like the idea of like your trauma as a child to heal, you revert back to being a child. Mark is really young. Like, he has a baby face.
Yeah. He's like 20 at the oldest.
Yeah, so I feel like she was fairly old, or like not fairly old, but like middle-aged when she had him.
Yeah, it's the reason why her getting revealed at being 60 at the end of the movie felt like a little unnecessary to me, because I was like, well, she is like 40. He could be your son even at that age. It's fine.
And Paul Caligari says something along the lines of like, a shock led her into this current mental state. So a shock was needed to take her out. And I think it kind of harkens back to an earlier shock, which is when she was 30 or 40, she was assaulted and raped, and that led to the birth of Mark. I'm not sure what would be the more recent break, but that's why it flashes back to that particular one, like the bigger impact breakdown. It's also why, like, we don't see a male companion in the picture. Like, Mark is alone. He doesn't have like his dad with him. So to take a step further, maybe it's the fact that like the father figure died and that's what caused the current mental break. Like, I don't know. The movie leaves it all open, but that's my theory.
It's really frustrating because some of the clues are like extremely specific. Like, oh, like she starts to remember at one point herself as a little girl. And she's like, yeah, I had pigtails. And then like in the flashback, the girl who's playing young her doesn't have pigtails. And in fact, like shakes her head at adult Jane remembering the scene. And then she's like, oh, right. They had cut my hair that year and I hated it or something. It's very like weirdly specific. Mark, when it's visiting hours, it's her delusion of him coming to her in visiting hours, but he like brings her this music box and she's like, oh, I used to have one just like this when I was a little girl. And Mark's like, yeah, I know everything about you. Except for what you were like as a little girl or something. And we see like a scene when she finally has the like climactic trauma where she runs out of Caligari's office after he's revealed that he's Paul, and the movie finally gives us some like expressionist hallways and stuff in a really kind of cool scene where she's running through these infinite hallways. We also get a bunch of these like flashbacks or delusions or whatever, and one of them is like her as a little girl in like a cage hanging from a tree that her mother like pushes away or something.
Yeah.
And so we get this feeling that she was rejected by her mother in some way. Like, there's so many really hyper specific references to things that make it feel like these are all definite pieces of a definite puzzle that Robert Bloch like had an idea of what the reveal was going to be, and then we just don't get the reveal. The thing that struck me was this confusion that she has where she thinks Mark is a potential love interest. She's like 40, but she tells Mark that she's only 27. And she tries to like embrace him and he gets really weird about it. And then when he's like, I'm going to take you away from here, she's like, no, you can't. And all this stuff. And then it's later, you know, and she goes like, oh, you can't be like a romantic interest to me. You're too young. Like, I always find that younger men like you are too immature. They just want a mother. Like, and then we find out that she is his mother later. And this kind of stuff. And that confusion between like son and romantic interest, between like I'm young or am I old, that to me was speaking more to like ideas of, I don't know, like dementia and like, did she try to like come on to her son because she couldn't remember
who he was?
Like when my, not that something like that actually happened to me, but just as an example, like when my grandmother was in her last few years, she had really, really bad dementia and she couldn't remember who you were when she was talking to you. And so like, I look a lot like how my grandfather looked at my age. And when she had dementia, she would sort of shift in time. She would think she was a teenager, and then she would think she was in her 30s, and she would kind of move through time. And as she moved through time, her interpretation of who you were as she was talking to you would change, right? So sometimes I was her husband. And so it's like, did something like that happen where she like made a move on her own son and that like broke her, or like what? But it is very frustrating the way that the movie doesn't provide us with an answer, and it feels like
a cop out.
It feels like a cop out. It feels like the movie going like, yeah, so as it turns out, she was in a mental hospital the whole time, but now she's cured. The end. And I think that's one of my biggest weaknesses with this movie, aside from kind of the structural thing I was talking about earlier, where it has this kind of repetitive, like Wile E. Coyote's going to try and catch the Roadrunner this time kind of feeling.
Yeah, will she get out this time? Yeah, before we talk about adaptation stuff, I do just want to say this movie has a really interesting editing style when it comes to violence. So at one point, it's after Caligari has like peeped at her. She takes a vase, smashes it, and with the broken glass, charges up the stairs ready to kill him. Like, go lady. And then coming down the stairs is Mark. And it's almost like he's going to trip and fall onto the glass. And it goes into this still photography thing. And it's a similar still photography thing that we get when we see Ruth being beaten and presumably killed. And it reminds me of the way that when you have a traumatic event, your mind, or at least my mind, grabs hold of moments, not full sequences.
Right.
And so I thought that was a really interesting way to visually show how her mind's interpreting this violence. And also like slows time down in a weird way, which trauma also does.
Yeah, it's that feeling of like, this moment is lasting forever, but I can't remember anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed the editing as well. There's a moment where I think what it is Chris offers her like a tissue and she bats it away. And that one simple action gets like 3 cuts. Like we have a wide, and then we cut to a different angle as she winds up her hand. And then we cut to like a third angle as she hits her. Which reminded me of the way that fight scenes are edited in the 60s James Bond movies in a way that was like really cutting edge for the time, of like splitting a single moment into like multiple angles and cuts. So I will just note that the editing in this film is by Archie Marshek, who had a career stretching back to the 20s. He edited The Most Dangerous Game, the 1939 version of Cat and the Canary, a lot of noir classics like The Glass Key and Ministry of Fear. And I think the editing here really is top-notch and beyond the norm, and doing a lot of really cool, interesting things, especially when we get the like weird expressionist sequence towards the end. But I, even with the scene of Ruth getting beaten, I agree with you that it has this like really effective psychological impact. Although part of me was like, are they doing this because they don't really know how to stage a scene of beating an 80-year-old woman to death like safely?
Yeah. It definitely had you're hitting her, but the impact is definitely being soft.
Also, speaking about the look of the movie, the film's cinematography is by John L. Russell, who had also shot Psycho.
Good get.
Yeah, I think it looks great. I think the production design, while obviously not as groundbreaking as the original movie, is still very good, with the modern architecture, yet still like creepy house thing that you were talking about earlier. The mad hallway sequence near the end is definitely a really nice homage to the original movie, and it's done really cleverly where we get this feeling of like running through an infinite hallway, and I think what they're actually doing is achieving it through miniature photography.
I think so.
There's also a sense of like her running towards a door and grabbing a door handle, but it's shot more as if she was falling down towards the door on the floor in a way. Like a lot of really cool stuff with the visuals here. I even think Roger Kay's direction is quite good in terms of getting the performances that he wants from the actors to support the story and bringing all the elements of the movie together to make like a coherent artistic statement. There's lots of great camera movement. They shot this in 25 days.
Okay.
So not only a little more money than usual, but a little more time than what we've seen for a lot of B pictures. So like they were really trying to make this, a movie. You know what I mean?
For sure.
I think the actors are all great.
Yeah, I would agree.
You called out like our lead, Glynis Johns. I think Dan O'Hurley also does a really great job as Paul/Caligari. And I also want to highlight Estelle Winwood, the actress in her 80s who plays Ruth, because I think she kind of steals the movie a little bit as well.
Yeah, well, she's having a lot of fun doing what she's doing.
I already said I think Johns looks really beautiful in this movie. Like she's really a knockout, but she also shows a lot of really good range as she swings from desperation to strength depending on the scene, and she plays those swings really well in a way that feels like a consistent character throughout the movie.
Yeah, she'll even do it within the same scene, which can feel a little jarring, but it's like later on in the movie, so you've already started to question her reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
O'Hurley also does really well. If I didn't know ahead of this that he was Caligari, like if I didn't know that going in, or if I didn't know him from his later roles, I don't know if I would have guessed the twist that Paul and Caligari are the same. But because of that, like he showed up, and so O'Hurley's Irish. I mostly know him from roles where he does an American accent. His voice for Caligari is a little weird, but it definitely leans into his Irish lilt to create like a talking pattern that seems a little strange. And then he's got like dark hair and like a chin strap beard. And I mostly know him as a much older actor in the 80s and 90s. So I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, he has dark hair. He's younger here. Like whatever. This is his natural Irish accent. And I could hear a little hint of the voice I was familiar with when he does American coming through. So I was like, yeah, this is Dan O'Hurley. And then Paul shows up, and Paul has light hair. It's probably meant to be blonde, but because the movie's in black and white, it just looks white. And he doesn't have the beard, and he's doing his more like flat kind of American accent. So he basically looks and sounds exactly like Dan O'Hurley does in like RoboCop or Twin Peaks, just like a little bit younger. And so I was like, oh shit, that's Dan O'Hurley. But I know Dan O'Hurley's playing Caligari. So I immediately knew that the twist was going to be these guys are the same guy. But it was kind of really cool. I was really stunned by the effectiveness of the transformation right away, because I was like, oh shit, no, that's Dan O'Hurley, like, kind of thing. Like, so he does a good job with it, I think.
Yeah, I think he does a good job doing the like dual role. Yeah, I would agree. So as far as the adaptation goes, I think this adaptation makes a lot of sense in a post-Psycho world. I think the simplification of Jane as our lead makes a lot of sense. I think they probably leaned on the adaptation as the reason why we don't get to learn why now. Like why this breakdown now and more about Jane, because the original doesn't care. So why should we in this current one?
The original is just about like a descent into
madness, really.
Madness, and kind of a series of ever increasing wild twists that start to make less and less sense, to the point where pulling out and being like, but the guy who's been telling you this story was crazy the whole time, kind of ends up being their only out.
Solve.
Yeah. I think that there are places where the movie falls down both on its own and as a version of the Caligari story in ways that I think kind of harms the movie coming and going. First off, there's the fact that the original movie has such an incredible, unique premise with like this fair and this guy with this sleepwalker who's doing murders and like all this nonsense before we get to the insane asylum part of things. That, this movie opening with the Rocky Horror style opening, as you pointed out, which is like a really common trope that we've seen a million times.
Oh, yeah. And I don't think Rocky Horror is taking it from this movie. As you said, it's a trope.
Yeah. And so I think it ends up feeling like, at least initially, like a bit of a dismal failure of imagination. Like, oh, you're doing a remake of one of the most unique movies of all time, and you decided to start it with like the most hack horror movie opening. Secondly, I think the fact that the two main things that they keep from the original movie are the name Caligari and the central twist that the protagonist has been in an insane asylum the entire time. The fact that those are the only elements they keep from the original work against each other in a way that kind of harms the movie no matter who you are.
Say more.
Well, so you keep the name Caligari because you want people who are familiar with Cabinet of Dr. Caligari to come to your movie, right? You're doing it for like name brand recognition because otherwise this is an entirely new story, more or less. You could have called this like The Nightmare of Jane Lindstrom and it would be fine. So you keep the name Caligari to get name recognition. But
they already know the twist.
Exactly. If I know who Caligari is, then I already know the twist, which means that the entire movie's rug is pulled out from it before we even start.
Maybe they're hoping for that in between where like you recognize the name, but it's been 20 to 40 years, so you don't remember enough.
You haven't seen the movie because you're 20 something and nobody shows you silent movies. Yeah, that's possible because I think the flip side is you don't know of the old movie and you don't know Caligari and you don't have the name recognition. And so then you don't care and you don't go to see the movie.
Or you sit there wondering, where's the cabinet?
Right. Okay. So like they changed the title. They take doctor out of the title. And I think they did that because it's supposed to be a twist that Caligari was a doctor running an insane asylum the whole time, right? So if you call him doctor right up front, it's like it makes it so much easier to immediately interpret what's going on correctly. But then they keep cabinet. And the cabinet in the original is the pine box that Cesare comes out of.
Yeah.
So like you kind of got rid of the wrong part. You should have just called it Caligari. Yeah. You know, you didn't have to call it Doctor or Cabinet of or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of the like, it's kind of the Star Trek Into Darkness Khan problem where it's like you've called this character Khan, a thing which only has significance to old school fans. But you've changed him in such an extreme degree that you're going to piss off the old school fans. But if you're just going for new school fans, then why did you call him Khan? That name has no meaning to them, right? It's this like weird catch-22 of like when you're trying to both benefit from nostalgia while also subvert it at the same time.
Yeah. Instead of a catch-22, it's a Caligari 22.
Right. You also like... They could have done this whole movie without the Caligari name and spared themselves $50,000.
But they wanted to spend that money. Mm-hmm. That's why they gave it $1 million. Mm-hmm. Well, let's move on to ranking.
For sure. So, Sarah, I had a really fucking hard time with ranking this movie. I think for all of the reasons I have given, where it's like, I like this. This is good. It has problems. Compared to the original, it's like better and worse at the same time. Like it's not as innovative or creative as the original at all, but it probably like makes a little more sense as a story rather than just an exercise in weirdness. Like, so I have a hard time. I have a big, long, huge range.
Okay. Well, to just start off, the original Das Cabinet de Dr. Caligari is ranked at number 50. So that's a starting point. Mm-hmm. I think my range is going to be shorter than yours, so why don't you go first?
My range is basically 25 movies to either side.
Oh, okay.
My range is 24 to 71.
Nice. We do have overlap.
Oh, thank goodness. That's good.
But tell me more.
So the first movie I started thinking of when I was thinking of like comparables for this, weirdly like wasn't Das Cabinet des Dr. Caligari. It was, in fact, Taste of Fear.
Sure.
Which has that same kind of perception of reality thing and like what's really going on kind of thing, and the same like semi-helpless but not really helpless lead female character and this kind of thing. Taste of Fear is at 22. Directly beneath Taste of Fear is The Innocents. I don't think Cabinet of Caligari is as good as either of those movies, but thematically there's like a through line here about, you know, mentally unwell female protagonists. Directly beneath The Innocents is Curse of the Werewolf, which we enjoy a lot for Oliver Reed and hair related reasons. But like,
I think it's technically fur.
Right. But that's also a movie that like takes like 2 acts to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well maybe Cabinet of Caligari is better than Curse of the Werewolf because it's kind of a little more interesting as a movie, and it's pushing boundaries, and it has cool things going on and visually and cinematically. So I ended up with that kind of being my ceiling. 24. Looking down, I found the original movie at number 50, and I was like, damn it. The original movie is like an iconic horror movie that to this day influences artists that people still talk about, that people still do like weird remakes and homages of, and nobody fucking remembers this remake from 1962 at all. How do you not rank this below that? Like, you know? Yeah. So I started looking below that and went down because we have a lot of really good movies up in this portion of the list. And where I hit was 71, which is The Screaming Skull. Okay. Where I went, okay, this might be worse than Eyes Without a Face, because Eyes Without a Face is very artsy and everybody loves it, and Guillermo del Toro and the Criterion Collection and all of that. But it's probably better than Screaming Skull, which, although I really like that movie, is like 2 people in like an empty house, like that was clearly shot because someone was like, yeah, this house is on the market. It's going to be sold in like 3 days. It's empty for the weekend. Do you want to shoot in it? Good movie, but there's more film artistry going on in Cabinet of Caligari, I think. So that ended up being my range. It's also a little, you know, gaslighty with its characters. Yes. Okay, cool. So I'm on the lower half of your range. Cool. I saw the original Caligari at 50, and I was like, for the reasons you outlined, this isn't going above. But the movie that I originally went to as a starting point is at 67, The Seventh Victim. That movie is about a cult trying to convince someone to kill themselves rather than someone threatening to kill themselves in order to be let out of the asylum. Right. But the vibes were similar. Ironically, despite Seventh Victim being from 1943, I feel like it's more provocative. It pushes more. It talks still indirectly, but it really pushes. And you get the really startling visual of someone hanging themselves. Yeah, absolutely. Seventh Victim's like really modern for 1943. So I think you could count Seventh Victim as a ceiling. But as I kind of went down, my eyes went to 82, Queen of Spades, the 1949 one, which also had someone dealing with madness, dealing with, what is real? What is my reality? And I feel like the Cabinet of Caligari handles it in, I think because we're in one location, it's much more focused than Queen of Spades. But I think that they're pretty comparable. So ultimately, my range is 67 to 82. Man, Anton Walbrook is so good in Queen of Spades. He is. It is a really good movie. That's why it's still in the top 100. For sure. So, yeah, I think honestly, we're kind of in the right range here. Why don't we just put this at 71 beneath Eyes Without a Face, above Screaming Skull? Kind of the bottom of my range, but kind of the middle of yours almost. That puts this above Brides of Dracula, the Hammer film. It puts us above Hands of a Stranger, the semi-Orlac adaptation from a couple of episodes ago. Which also had this very psychological thing, but it kind of farted at the ending, you know? a little bit, but this movie kind of also has a bit of a weak ending too, which I think is like really the key to like a psychological movie, is like whether that ending works or not, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Let's do this.
Okay, so entering the list at the new number 71, a surprisingly good showing for a movie with as, I think, bad a reputation as this seemed, where both the writer and the director kind of disowned it. It's Cabinet of Caligari from 1962, directed by Roger Kay.
I do like that the American adaptation changes it from Caligari to Caligari, just like the American Jekyll and Hyde changed it to Jekyll instead of Jekyll.
Right.
If you would like to take a look at this list that we have just mentioned, you can head to our website, screamscenepodcast.com. There you can find links to the other episodes that we have mentioned, as well as our appeals box. If you would like to contest this or any other ranking, you can drop us a line through our Ask box on Tumblr. You can reach out over email at screamscenepodcast@gmail.com, talk to us on Blue Sky, or through Patreon.
Do you like Caligari better, or do you like Edmonton?
That is a very specific joke. We live in Calgary, Alberta, and there is an ongoing rivalry with the capital of our province, Edmonton, Alberta, and that's what Ben is doing here.
Just doing really narrow-casted jokes over here.
Niche. Or is it niche? I swear to God.
Scream Scene updates every other Wednesday on SoundCloud and a variety of other podcasting apps. You can make sure that you never miss an episode by subscribing to our RSS feed. If you like the show and want to help it out, you can leave us a rating or a review on the podcasting app that you choose. You can also just share the show, show it to your friends, share links on social media. Whatever way you can help spread the word really helps out us a lot, because word of mouth is really the main way that people find out about podcasts. If you really enjoy what we're doing and would like to help support us financially, you can do that by heading on over to patreon.com/Scream Scene Podcast, where you can become a patron of the night for as little as $1 a month. Patrons at the $1 level get thanked on the show, and at the $5 and $10 levels, you get access to bonus audio, bonus writing, a whole collection of cool things that we have done over the years over on patreon.com/Scream Scene Podcast.
What are we watching next week, Ben?
In our next episode, Sarah, it stars Gregory Peck and Robert Mitchum.
Oh, is this Cave of Fear or whatever? Cape Fear?
Cape Fear. Yes, we are watching Cape Fear next week for Scream Scene.
I've been wanting to see this movie for so long. Amazing. I'm so excited. Great. Well, I'm going to go watch the Bad Bunny halftime show, and we will see you then, creatures of the night.
Bye.
Bye.